Hi, I'm Ben the Backroom Editor, and today I'm going to talk about how the editing of Spider-Man Homecoming broke the character of Happy. In fact, it also ruined some of the plot and character motivation for Peter. So, what exactly is happening here? Well, there's a deleted scene at the beginning of the movie in Peter Parker's short film that really unlocks the key for why Happy just won't have anything to do with Peter. And we don't really know why that is in the finished film. In the original cut that we see in the cinema, Happy's just kind of a jerk. He starts off as annoyed and then, for no real reason, ghosts Peter for months. Now, it could be that he's really busy, it could be that he just doesn't like babysitting, or maybe he doesn't like that Peter comes from a poor background. We don't really know. Now, as an editor, you don't want that kind of ambiguity in this kind of structured storytelling. So, depending on how you count it, there's 8 different scenes in Spider-Man Homecoming's opening segment. We start off with the cleanup of the aftermath of the Battle of New York, and we introduce several characters, including the Department of Damage Control. Then we have the scene back at the base where they decided to go rogue, and then another 8 years later where they're in full swing. Next, cue the Marvel logo. Then there's Peter Parker's short film, which itself is a montage of several scenes, going from the US to Tony Stark's jet, arriving in Berlin, the hotel, the suit up, the new suit, the Civil War fight, and then the thin walls scene.
We have thin walls here.
But there's still more to get through before this movie really gets going. There's the scene in the car with Tony, half of which is recording a cover message for Aunt May, and the other half is where Tony tells Spider-Man where he operates. The film only really starts about here, 2 months later on the subway. Up till now, it's 9 minutes and 23 seconds worth of setup. Arguably, everything up until now is essential, and in some ways a wrap-up to a previous movie. And to be fair, the only change I'd probably make is to move the scene where the Vulture says business is good until after we've met Peter. But then that does interfere with the flow for both the Vulture and Peter's stories. So the other option would be to simply drop in a single one-shot scene where it conveys everything about the new operation, but more quickly than the finished edit. So does the finished movie work, and is it enjoyable? Yes, I really enjoy it. But knowing that there was a better version really gets to me. So let's have a look at what actually happens in that deleted scene. After the "we have thin walls" scene, there's an entire sequence that's cut out. This is where Peter, in his adrenaline, decides to go out in his Spider-Man suit. He ends up partying, even unwittingly rescuing the German Chancellor. The next morning at breakfast, Happy spots something in the paper and confronts Peter about it, asking if he'd been out late last night Spider-Manning, to which Peter says yes, but lies by downplaying it, saying it was a quick go around the block. And then Peter geeks out over the photo, and you can see it in Happy's eyes. He snaps. This is it. This is why Happy couldn't engage with Peter afterwards. Not only did Peter lie to Happy, he's repeating Tony's mistakes of disregarding the consequences of his public actions, and that would trigger Happy. Remember, the last time he tried to help, he ended up being blown up in Iron Man 3 and spent most of that movie in hospital. Now, in the final cut, we miss all this. So was it the editor's fault that this was cut out? Yes and no, it was the editor who took it out, but sometimes an editor is asked to put a square peg into a round hole. Ask any editor why they end up taking something out of a movie, and ultimately it's going to be because of the runtime or because of pacing issues. Now, this original version is so much better. It's more about the abdication of responsibility and how this drives Peter's actions going forward, and thus the movie. Other parts of the movie are undermined by this deletion as well. There's a parallel between the Berlin midnighting party scene and Liz's house party scene later in the movie. At Liz's party, Spider-Man is going to come in as a party trick. But if you stop to think about it, this is exactly what he did, albeit perhaps unintentionally, in Berlin. By the time he gets to Liz's party, he now realises that Spider-Man isn't a party trick. This is character growth, and this is all lost. I think a big takeaway here is the fact that as editors we're often tasked with cramming a lot into a short amount of time, and we have to sacrifice something or trim things out. Inevitably though, we can end up taking out some of the meat or the heart of the story, and really we need to understand why Peter Parker and Happy Hogan aren't talking to each other, because it drives the whole movie. Ultimately, a lot of the time you don't know what's going to happen until you see it in the edit bay. So maybe it's nobody's fault. So the next time that you're editing a project, spare a thought for characters or plot lines like these. And let me know, how would you have tackled this problem if you were the editor? Until next time.